Good evening, friends. Let's get ready to open our hearts together as we go into this most holy time.
We begin our service with Ani Yeshena on page 685.
How are we asleep, and how might our hearts be wakened as we go into this Shabbat Shabbaton, this Sabbath of Sabbaths, this day on which all may be forgiven.
I'd like to invite our singers, Mina Wegner, Shira Rubenstein, and Richard Argosh, up for candle lighting. And the brachot for the lighting of the candles can be found on page 688.
And every Shabbat I instruct us to, as best we can, exhale the anxieties, the burdens of the week. And with this taking in of light, I invite us to exhale the anxieties, the burdens, the guilts, the resentments of the year that has been. And see if we can wiggle in some space to allow something new. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Yom HaKippurim.
May it be your will, Eternal One, our God and God of our ancestors, that these candles light up the pathway of return on this, your holy Shabbaton, a Sabbath of complete cessation. By their light, may your light be seen. And let us say, Amen.
Amen. Yom Kippur at Temple Beth Israel in previous years that I've been here has had the feel of a family reunion. We have seen each other for the first time, in some cases, in a whole year. We've gotten to reconnect. We've gotten to hug each other. And alas, oy, that we have another year where Yom Kippur is not physically functioning in that way. But those of you tuning in over the chat, I really encourage you to wish each other Gemar Chatima Tova, that we be sealed for a good year and Tzom Kal, an easy fast, and let us know you're here. Let us know that we are gathered here doing this together. We often, for Yom Kippur, also honor the past presidents with candle lighting. Obviously, most of them, they're not here this evening, but we're thinking of them. And we honor many communal servants with the parade of the Sifrei Torah as we prepare for Kol Nidre. But this evening, I just invite my co-leader for Yom Kippur of many years, and it happens our current president, Jared Rubin, to open the Ark for Kol Nidre and carry one of the Sifrei Torah with me as we prepare to do this holy work.
Please stand as you are able as the Ark is opened.
Or Zarua Tzadik, Ule Yisrael Simcha. Or Zarua Kol Nidre, this aching, plaintive tune, goes to words that are, on their face, rather a dry, legalistic message. We annul our vows, the vows that it didn't make sense to make, the vows that should have been no vows. And our tradition is very clear that this is not about weaseling out of promises that we made and should have kept. Our tradition is very clear that this is about those things that we swore to ourselves, those things that we swore to God, those times that we said, I swear to God, and then whatever, fill in the blank, that we probably shouldn't have said. That words matter, that those words have echoes and ripples and leave a residue, that with this proclamation, we wipe the slate clean. And I learned this week, a week ago, a teaching by a colleague of mine, Rabbi Avi Killip of the Hadar Institute. She wrote, publicly annulling and negating our vows is not about a lack of integrity or an unwillingness to live up to our word. Rather, it is a call to let our feuds and grudges fall away. It is an opportunity to lower our walls and to interact in a more fluid way with our community and environment. Today, even those of us who not worried about official nidarim, nidre, halachic vows, have our own versions of anger-induced interpersonal divides. We have friends, colleagues, family members with whom we don't communicate. We have places we refuse to set foot and people we refuse to call. During the month of Elul, we make our best effort to bridge these gaps and repair broken relationships. Kol Nidre is the last step in this process. In the last moments before Yom Kippur, we reject our vows as a community. In the moment of Kol Nidre, we finally and completely tear down the last remaining walls, reject our divisions, and begin to pray together as one whole community. So knowing the real distances that divide us, knowing the ways that we have been fed up, we have wanted to break things with frustration, let Kol Nidre allow some of that to relax going into this Yom Kippur.
We turn now to page 692 with the transliteration on page 691 for people with the TBI Machzorim. And you can also find it on the PDF in the chat. I'd invite people to join in on the third repetition of Kol Nidre.
Yeshiva shel mala, u'v'yeshiva shel mata, al dat hamakom ve'al dat hakahal, anu matirin litpalel im havaryanim.
Page 694.
ושבועי וחרמי וקונמי וכינוסי וכינויי
שבועי וחרמי וקונמי וכינוסי וכינויי כיפורים זה. הבא עלינו לטובה. כל הון איחרתנה להון. כל הון יהון שרן. יהון שרן. בטלין ומבוטלים, לעשירים ולקיימים, נדרנה
Please join me on the top of page 695 for the first 4 lines. And there shall be atonement for the whole community of Israel and the stranger dwelling in their midst, indeed, for an entire people that has gone astray.
סלחנה לעוונם הזה, כגודל חסדך, וכאשר נשאת לעם הזה ממצרים ועד הנה, ושם נאמר, ויאמר אדוני, סלחתי כדבריך, ויאמר אדוני, סלחתי כדבריך, ויאמר אדוני, סלחתי כדבריך.
The fount of mercy said, I grant forgiveness as you ask.
ברוך אתה אדוני, אלוהינו מלך העולם, שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה.
We turn now to page 708 for the Baruch Hu. Please rise as you are able.
המבורך, ברוך אדוני, המבורך, לעולם ועד. ברוך אדוני המבורך, לעולם ועד.
I'm on page 710, the first paragraph below the line. Asher bidvaro ma'ariv aravim, by whose word the evenings fall. The word plays a central role in the Jewish imagination. Our liturgy fantasizes that God brings on evening each night by saying, evening. Thus, we repeat each day the original act of creation that took place by means of the divine word. It is only because we affirm a God who so values language that we feel ourselves able to use words in prayer. Our word, perhaps like God's, gives expression to a depth that goes beyond language, but that can be shared only through the symbolic power of speech.
ומעביר יום, ומביא לילה, ומבדיל בין יום ובין לילה, אדוני צבאות שמו. אל חי וקיים, תמיד ימלוך עלינו לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני. המריב ערבים.
Turn now to page 712.
אהבת עולם בית ישראל, עמך אהבת, אהבת עולם בית ישראל, עמך אהבת. תורה ומצוות, חוקים ומשפטים, אותנו לימדת, תורה ומצוות, חוקים ומשפטים, אותנו לימדת. ועבדך לא תסור ממנו לעולמים. ברוך אתה אדוני.
ברוך הוא ברוך שמו.
אוהב עמו ישראל.
Amen. We turn now to page 714 for the Shema.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto, Leolam Va'ed. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבבך, ושיננתם לבניך, ודיברת בם, בשבתך ובביתך, ובלכתך בדרך, ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם להיות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך.
Please continue silently with your choice of biblical selections through page 722.
Adonai Elohechem emet.
We continue with the last two lines of page 726.
Umalchuto v'ratzon kiblu aleihem Moshe uMiriam u'bnei Yisrael lechanu shira b'simcha rabba v'yameru chulam Mi chamocha b'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh, nora tehilot oseh v'eleh. Malchutcha rauvanecha, וכהים לפני משה, זה אלי, אנו ויאמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. ונאמר, כי פדה אדוני את יעקב, וגאלו מיד חזק ממנו, ברוך אתה אדוני. גאל ישראל.
We turn now to page 730.
השכיבנו, אדוני אלוהינו, לשלום. והעמידנו מלכנו לחיים ופרוס עלינו סוכת שלומך ותקננו ועצה טובה ועצה טובה פניך והושיענו והושיענו למען שמך והגן בעדנו והסר מעלינו אויב דבר וחרב ורעב ויגון והסר שטן מלפנינו ומאחרינו ובצל כנפיך תסתירנו כי אל שומרנו ומצילנו אתה כי אל מלך חנון חנון ורחום אתה ושמור צאתנו ובואנו לחיים ולשלום מעתה ויד עולם ופרוס עלינו סוכת שלומך ברוך אתה אדוני הפורש סוכת שלום עלינו ועל כל עמו ישראל ועל ירושלים.
We turn now to page 734.
כי ביום הזה יכפר עליכם לטהר אתכם מכל חטאותיכם לפני אדוני תטהרו.
We are moving into the Amidah part of the service. The Amidah will occur after we say Kaddish together. And additional prayers of personal confession that start on page 762. It all concludes on page 774. It's traditional to stand for the duration of the Amidah, but you are welcome to sit as you finish or as needed. The Chatzi Kaddish can be found on page 736.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה בעלמא דברך חירותי וימליך מלכותי בחיי חון וביומי חון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל בגלה ובזמן קריב ויאמרו אמן. יהי שמי רב המברך לעלם ולעלמי עלמיה יתברך יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו לעילה לעילה מכל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דמירן בעלמה ויאמרו Amen.
What a mess we are in, my friends. It's the whole list. The political polarization, the climate disasters unfolding catastrophically here and all over the world, the maddening and exhausting and deadly persistence of COVID-19. And there's one question that I keep finding simmering as the subtext of many conversations I have about these many messes. Who's to blame? In the face of vulnerability, it's a very normal human response to seek to blame, to insulate ourselves in virtue, and to locate the source and therefore the solution to all of our problems outside of the realm of our own actions and agency. In the ancient tradition, as we'll read tomorrow in Leviticus 16, our ancestors dealt with the burden of vulnerability and collective complicity by selecting between two goats, one for sacrifice, the other to have confession of the community's sins made over it before being sent into the wilderness. About 1,000 years ago, long after this ritual was no more, the great sage Maimonides explained the significance of the goat sent into the wilderness. As this goat seemed to carry off all sins, it was not accepted as an ordinary sacrifice, he wrote. It was removed as far as possible and sent forth into a waste, uncultivated, uninhabited land. This ritual, placing society's transgressions on the head of the goat to be exiled, is, of course, the origins of the term scapegoat. But as Rabbi Jonathan Sachs wrote, contrary to the modern conception of a scapegoat, the original scapegoat was not an occasion for denying responsibility by blaming the victim, but to the contrary, an acceptance of responsibility in the context of repentance and atonement. The Yom Kippur ritual of the scapegoat allowed the community to stay united in its efforts to confess wrong and to seek a way forward without, in fact, scapegoating anyone in the human community, rough as it certainly was for the goat. It's been millennia since the Jewish people have banished a goat into the wilderness. We've turned to our present rituals of collective teshuvah and prayer to seek expiation for our transgressions. Tonight and in this season, however, I ache for the sociological function that goat filled, preventing us from turning on each other and seeking someone to cast out and blame. I am so distressed about the increasing division and pain in our country broadly and within our community. I'm aware that our exhaustion with the ever-worsening status quo causes us to insulate ourselves in ever narrower circles of moral purity. Our ancestors understood that we cannot accomplish any spiritual work, let alone solve any big problems, if we locate the cause of all of our problems as separate entities outside of ourselves. Hence all the confessions in the plural. So I want to try to thread a very delicate needle with you this evening towards a different model of being in community. For the past 2,000 years, Jewish intellectual tradition and innovation have been based around a value of constructive conflict between people who firmly disagree with each other while respecting each other. The Hebrew word for this concept is machloket, which officially translates as disagreement, but there's more to it than that. Machloket itself is the essence of our oral tradition, the Talmud. The earliest layers, the Mishnah, the oral law, will typically be constructed by a conversation that will go something like this. How do we fulfill such and such mitzvah? And then it will offer an answer, followed by, that is the opinion of Rabbi so-and-so, and the sages disagree. And the other rabbi says this. And then the Gemara, the later layer, the bulk of the Talmud, is the arguments between later generations of rabbis about what the rabbis of the Mishnah meant and why they thought what they thought. In the Talmud, disagreement is not a problem. Disagreement is how we get to truth. This machloket idea is best conceptualized in the tradition of the schools of Hillel and Shammai, who disagreed about almost everything throughout the Mishnah. In Masechet Eruvin, page 13b, the Gemara relates, for years, Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel, the house of Shammai and the house of Hillel, disagreed. These said, the halakha is in accordance with us. And these said, the halakha is in accordance with us. A divine voice emerged and proclaimed, both these and these are the words of the living God. However, the halakha is in accordance with Beit Hillel. Since both these and these are the words of the living God, why were Beit Hillel privileged to have the halakha established in accordance with them? The Talmud says, because they were agreeable and forbearing, and when they taught halakha, they would teach both their own statements and the statements of Beit Shammai, the house of Shammai. Moreover, they taught the statements of Beit Shammai before teaching their own statements. There's something profound here in the pursuit of truth, in the pursuit of just law. Even if one side will ultimately win, the Gemara relates, the other side possesses an important perspective. In teaching Shammai's teachings before their own, the school of Hillel certainly wasn't suggesting that Shammai's teachings were more correct than their own, but they understood that to effectively argue, you can't write off the person who disagrees with you as stupid or evil. You must actually hear their argument, understand it, even be able to sympathetically repeat it yourself in order to have any hope of engaging it. There's another instructive teaching about machloket in Pirkei Avot. Every dispute that is for the sake of heaven, machloket l'shem shamayim, will in the end endure, but one that is not l'shem shamayim, not for the sake of heaven, will not endure. And which is the machloket that is for the sake of heaven? Such was the controversy between Hillel and Shammai. And which controversy is not for the sake of heaven? Such was the controversy of Korach and his congregation. Korach, for those who don't remember, led a rebellion in the book of Numbers against the leadership of Moshe. And he sought to claim power for himself and his followers. He was not interested in getting to any kind of truth, only, in fact, in making Moshe a scapegoat for the sake of his own ambitions. Our tradition is clear. Not all machloket is for the sake of heaven, is worthy of engaging. And one of the best litmus tests for whether a machloket, whether a controversy is for the sake of heaven or not, is whether the different sides are actually seeking to engage with each other, or whether one or more side is trying to scapegoat the other. Not only their views, but their very existence as the problem. So there are two areas of discourse in our own community where I would like to see us elevating our controversies into machlokot that are for the sake of heaven, where we're trying to hear each other. I'll go with the easy one first, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. When the violence broke out within Israel and between Israel and Gaza in late May, this past spring, Jews and others, but I'm talking about us, Jews, rushed to either stand with Palestine or to stand with Israel as if those binary options were the only possibility, as if each society is monolithic. In the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, as in all moral conversations, it is tempting to identify the good side to support and the bad side, the scapegoat, to condemn. But the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is intractable precisely because it is intractable. There are two peoples with serious unaddressed historical trauma and both with legitimate right to live in the land. Both groups have been led for decades by corrupt, self-interested leaders who had no interest in making any kind of peace and who only sought to scapegoat the other side. But Israeli and Palestinian society are not monolithic. In this moment, as Americans, we should know better than to paint any society according to the actions of its leaders. There are Israeli Jews and Palestinians on both sides of the Green Line, fighting with love for a vision of a shared, just society in which all can flourish. And when we make or allow claims that the problem is the Palestinians or that the problem is the Israelis, we invisibilize the truth that neither people is going anywhere, neither people should go anywhere. I'm tired of Jews being embarrassed about Israel's existence. Zionism, at its core, is the aspiration of Jewish self-determination. It is unconscionable that disavowing Zionism be a litmus test for Jewish welcome in any space, and it is morally incoherent that every nation, including Palestinians, has the right to self-determination, but Jewish Israelis should not. Jews must have a right to self-determination in our historical homeland. And I am tired of the fact that many Jews all over the world act as if there is no conceivable way to claim that right without denying not only the rights but the humanity of Palestinians in the same land. Rabbi Daniel Hartman, a lifelong Israeli Zionist thought leader, has recently written a charge to his followers noting that, quote, the history of Palestinian rejection of peace does not exculpate a litany of claimed occupation power abuses, which are unrelated to Israel's legitimate security concerns, the mistreatment and daily humiliation suffered by Palestinians living under occupation, end quote. Hartman lists the examples of abuse, discrimination, unequal access to resources that Palestinians suffer, which are in fact indefensible in the name of security, and which actually undermine long-term prospects for security or peace. Mohammed Al-Tululi, a Palestinian blogger based in Germany, wrote on May 18th, "The people in Gaza who think like me cannot demonstrate. Any protest would end in bloodshed and prison, but please know that even though we are taught hatred in our schools and listen to hateful propaganda, in our hearts, many of us are with the Israeli peace demonstrations on the other side of the fence." In a machloket l'shem shamayim, a true conflict for the sake of heaven, about Israel, about Palestine, there are visions worth genuinely arguing about over what is possible, what needs to change, what can change, how, within a framework of acknowledging both Israeli, Jewish, and Palestinian right to the land. As interfaith Sikh activist Valerie Kaur wrote beautifully on May 26th, "All week I have been mourning with Jewish friends who have family in Israel hiding in bomb shelters. And all week I have been mourning with Palestinian friends whose family in Gaza have no shelters to hide in at all. My mourning transcends political agendas. Your mourning can too. The time has come to center the human cost of the conflict above all." For many, but certainly not all of us, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict often feels very far away. And maybe we only think about it when a flare in violence takes over the news cycle and we rush to find a suitable scapegoat, which is precisely why I think it's necessary to discuss it when our minds are relatively clear and calm as well. Beginning after the high holidays, we'll be putting together a series of events featuring joint Israeli and Palestinian social change groups who are exploring and working towards a vision of a more just country together. I encourage you to attend these virtual events, especially if you find yourself inclined to view one side as the problem. These creative and committed Israelis and Palestinians who are actually living the machloket of how do we do this together rather than kill each other, and whose work rarely makes the news or the flat discourse, are the people who deserve elevation and our support. So that was the easy one. But what about scapegoating and machloket when the stakes feel life or death right here, right now for us personally? Which brings up my second concern. I am concerned with COVID-19 for the physical safety of all of us in this community. And I am also very concerned about the contempt and division arising in our community around vaccination choices. Vaccination is not a machloket in the classic sense, in that it is actually uncontroversial among Jewish leadership. The major rabbinical organizations of Reform through Orthodox Judaism in America have all published statements urging vaccination, in some cases even defining it as a Jewish legal halachic responsibility. And it would be easy to use that unified rabbinic position to point out the moral responsibility of every eligible adult to get vaccinated. But I know from conversations with many in our community, more than I would have expected, who have refused to get the vaccine, that the experiences and fears driving the reluctance about the vaccine cannot be addressed through sweeping moral arguments. I know some of you have histories of medical trauma, experiences where some treatment that was supposed to work for everyone failed you so spectacularly that you do not trust that yet another fix that is supposed to keep everyone safe will work for you. I also know that those of you who are unvaccinated are already receiving pressure from friends, family members, medical professionals, in some cases your workplaces, to be vaccinated. I know that you're struggling socially and emotionally with both the consequences of sharing your choice honestly and the burden of hiding it. Hearing me pile on will not convince you to get vaccinated. It will instead communicate that Temple Beth Israel is not a place where you can be honest about your fears and vulnerabilities. And I want our synagogue community to be a place where all of us can be honest about our fears and vulnerabilities. So I strive to balance my care for each of you, each of us as individuals, with my real responsibility to the well-being of the collective. The science is clear that short of never going outside of one's house, vaccination is the greatest general protection against both contracting and spreading mortal cases of COVID-19. If you don't get vaccinated, you do have a responsibility to take every other possible precaution to keep yourself and the rest of us safe. And I know many of you understand this, and I appreciate that you understand when we decide that some of our events are only safe for vaccinated people to attend. And that will likely happen more as the weather gets colder and we move more in-person events inside. But as every B'nai Mitzvah student has heard me say, I believe in teaching Torah about how I, not how somebody else, needs to change. So to my fellow vaccinated people, we as a community have a responsibility to acknowledge that there is a machloket where the moral obligation to protect the public health hits against a moral right, which I think we all recognize in the abstract, of every individual to decide what goes into their body. We also need to notice the systemic failures in which we are all complicit that lead many people to refuse the vaccine. As Rhea Boyd pointed out a month ago in The Nation, the unvaccinated are disproportionately people who have historically been poorly served by the medical establishment. She discusses the hidden costs of even a free vaccine, from the time it takes to get it to the fact that many workers don't have reliable transportation, a regular medical provider whom they trust, who's advising them, and don't have sick pay to cover even a day missed because of potential side effects. We, the vaccinated, are still complicit in the failures of our medical and economic system, as well as in the global health inequity and patent laws that have prevented vaccine distribution in other countries. If you don't know what I'm talking about, search online for the People's Vaccine Campaign. As satisfying as it might be to make the amorphous unvaccinated all our scapegoat, we don't get to do that. Of course, whatever the issue is, we are allowed to be angry about the choices other people make. But our task, all of us, is to stay in relationship beyond anger. Contempt is an impediment to our own spiritual work, and it can destroy a community. We must figure out how to continue to share community instead of practicing moral insulation. And yes, it is a practice, and we can stop practicing it by shunting all that bad moral energy onto people making choices that we find immoral. We all make choices that cause harm or have the potential to cause harm to others sometimes. Scapegoating an other will not get us out of any of our problems. It will only block the recognition of our own work to do as our worlds crumble. The greatest spiritual antidote to this practice is to acknowledge our own complicity, is to share the burden of our complicity together. The problem is not those other people, whoever they are. Even without a goat, the Yom Kippur liturgy still points us and prods us to our collective work with all the confessions that we make in the plural. This is on all of us, and we hold it together. I am sure my remarks have caused some of you discomfort, even anger this evening. Please know that I am speaking from my concern and love for this community. I really hope we can embrace the discomfort together and allow it to open our hearts and fuel our spiritual work. So as we prepare to collectively knock our hearts open in confession, we sing slichot, beginning with Ya'aleh, a hope that our prayers literally rise up. We strive to elevate our messiness, our fears, our resentments, our failures into some kind of transformation. May our prayers rise, and may we rise to the challenge this year.
We continue our service on page 782 with Ya'aleh. Please stand as you are able as we open the ark.
תחנוננו מערב, ויבוא שבתנו מבוקר, ויראה רינוננו עד ערב. Katenu ad Arev. Yale, Yale, Yale Dovkeinu me'erev, ve'yavo gileinu miboker, v'yira'eh bakashatenu ad Arev. Yale, Yale, Yalein katenu me'erev, ve'yavo eilecha miboker, ve'yira'eh eileinu ad Arev. Yale, Yale.
You may be seated. Please join me on page 785 for the middle paragraph. The soul is yours, the body is your handiwork. Be sparing, please, to all that you have made. The soul is yours, the body yours. O fount of mercy, act in keeping with your name.
הנשמה לך והגוף הולך, חוסה, חוסה, העולם הלך. הנשמה לך והגוף הולך, חוסה,
We continue now on page 794 with the transliteration on page 795.
רחם עלינו, אדון הסליחות, בוחן לבבות, גולי עמוקות, דובר צדקות, חטאנו לפניך, רחם עלינו, חטאנו לפניך, רחם עלינו, הדור בנפלאות ורב העלילות, זוכר ברית אבות, חוקר כליות, חטאנו לפניך, רחם עלינו, חטאנו לפניך, רחם עלינו, טוב ומיטיב לבריות, יודע כל נסתרות, כובש עוונות, לובש צדקות, חטאנו לפניך, רחם עלינו, חטאנו לפניך, רחם עלינו, מלא זכיות, נורא תהילות, סולח עוונות, עוני בצרות, חטאנו לפניך, רחם עלינו, חטאנו לפניך, רחם עלינו, פועל ישועות, צופה העתידות, קורא הדורות, רוכב ערבות, שומע תפילות, תמיד דעות, חטאנו לפניך, רחם עלינו, חטאנו לפניך, רחם עלינו, חטאנו לפניך, רחם עלינו.
We turn now to page 800. Please stand as you are able.
Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum v'Chanun, Erech Apayim, V'Rav Chesed v'Emet, Notzer Chesed la'alafim, Nosei avon v'pesha v'chata v'nakeh. Adonai, Adonai, Erachum v'Chanun, Erech Apayim, V'Rav וסלחת לעווננו ולחטאתנו ונחלתנו.
We turn now to page 802.
Salach lanu avinu ki chatanu. Forgive us, our Creator, for we have done wrong. Machalanu malkenu ki fashanu. Grant pardon to us, Sovereign, for we have transgressed. Ki ata Adonai tov v'salach v'rav chesed lechol korecha.
Please be seated.
So we just invoked the 13 attributes of mercy to remind ourselves that it's safe to confess. We're not about to be punished. We're not about to be cut off. We are not about to be the goat sent away alone into the wilderness, but that we are doing this in the context of compassion. And that as we are made in the image of the divine, we are called to treat our own confessions and each other's confessions with compassion. So you've heard me, many of you, say before, we're not beating ourselves. We're knocking. As we sang at the very beginning of this service, the voice of the beloved knocks on our hearts. Open up. The practice of a confession is the practice of dismantling the walls of defensiveness and fear. The stories, but I'm a good person, I don't do bad things, that we tell that actually get in the way of us being the best we can be, that get in the way of the very simple truth that to be human is to fail sometimes. To be human is to fail each other sometimes. To be human is to fail ourselves sometimes. So we open our hearts to the full humanity of that we are as we hold the burden of confession together.
We continue on page 814.
Hear our voice. Attend to us. May we know as we go into this that we are heard. Shema, Shema, Koleinu. Shema, Koleinu. Shema, Shema, Koleinu. Shema, Koleinu. Adonai Eloheinu, Shema Koleinu, Chus berachem aleinu, Shema Koleinu, vekabel berachamim וברצון את תפילתנו וקבל ברחמים וברצון את תפילתנו שמע קולנו.
turn now to page 816.
Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, Al tazmeinu ve'al titzenu ve'al techlimenu, ve'al tafer britcha itanu. Karvenu letoratecha limdenu mitzvotecha, horeinu darkecha, ad libenu lire et shemecha, umol et levavenu le'ahavatecha, v'nashuv elecha be'emet, u'v'levav shalem. ולמען שמך הגדול תמחה ותסלח לעווננו, ככתוב בדברי קודשך, למען שמך אדוני, וסלחת לעווני כי רב הוא. אלוהינו, אלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו, סלח לנו, מחל לנו, כפר לנו. כי אנו עמך ואתה אלוהינו, אנו בניך ואתה אבינו, אנו עבדיך ואתה אדוננו, אנו קהלך ואתה חלקנו, אנו נחלתך ואתה גורלנו, אנו צונך ואתה רוענו, אנו חרמך ואתה נוטרנו, אנו פעולתך ואתה יוצרנו, אנו רעייתך ואתה דודנו, אנו סגולתך ואתה קרובנו, אנו עמך ואתה מלכנו, אנו מאמירך ואתה מאמירנו.
Please join me on page 817 in the second paragraph. Our God, our ancients' God, may our prayer come before you. Hide not from our supplication, for we are not so insolent and stubborn as to say, here in your presence, Holy One, God of our fathers and our mothers, we are righteous and we have not sinned, for we have indeed sinned. Please stand as you are able. We turn now to page 820 for the Ashamnu.
Ashamnu,
Ashamnu,
Bagadnu,
Bagadnu,
Gazalnu,
Gazalnu,
Dibarnu Dofi,
Dibarnu Dofi,
ay, 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 ay,
Shanu,
Zadnu,
Zadnu, Chamasnu,
Tafalnu shaker.
Tafalnu shaker.
Ay, 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 Yatznura.
Yatznura,
Kizavnu.
Kizavnu,
Latznu.
Latznu,
Maradnu.
Maradnu,
Niatznu.
Niatznu,
Sararnu.
Sararnu,
Avinu.
Avinu,
Pashanu.
Pashanu,
Sararnu.
Sararnu,
Kishinu Orev.
Kishinu Orev.
Ay, 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 Roshanu.
Roshanu,
Shichatnu.
Shichatnu,
Tiavnu.
Tiavnu,
Tainu.
Tainu,
Titanu.
Titanu.
Ay, 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 ay,
We continue with the Al-Chet prayers, alternating in Hebrew and English. They begin on page 827 and extend to 832.
Alchit shechatanu lefanecha be'imutz halev.
For the wrong that we have done before you in the closing of the heart,
Alchit shechatanu lefanecha bivli da'at.
and for the wrong that we have done before you without knowing what we do,
Alchit shechatanu lefanecha begalui uvaseter.
for the wrong that we have done before you, whether open or concealed,
Alchit shechatanu lefanecha bedat uvemirma.
and for the wrong that we have done before you knowingly and by deceit,
Alchit shechatanu lefanecha beharhur halev.
for the wrong that we have done before you through the prompting of the heart,
Alchit shechatanu lefanecha biv'idat zenut.
and for the wrong that we have done before you through the influence of others,
Alchit shechatanu lefanecha bezadon uvishkaga.
for the wrong that we have done before you, whether by intention or mistake,
Alchit shechatanu lefanecha bechozek yad.
and for the wrong that we have done before you by the hand of violence,
Alchit shechatanu lefanecha betipshut peh.
for the wrong that we have done before you through our foolishness of speech,
Alchit shechatanu lefanecha beyitzer hara.
and for the wrong that we have done before you through an evil inclination.
Ve'al kulam elo aslichot. Selach lanu mechalanu kaper lanu. Alchit shechatanu lefanecha bechapat shochad.
For the wrong that we have done before you in the palming of a bribe,
Alchit shechatanu lefanecha belatzon.
and for the wrong that we have done before you by expressions of contempt,
Alchit shechatanu lefanecha b'machal u'b'mishteh.
for the wrong that we have done before you through misuse of food and drink,
Alchit shechatanu lefanecha b'neshech u'b'marbit.
and for the wrong that we have done before you by our avarice and greed,
Alchit shechatanu lefanecha b'shikur ayin.
for the wrong that we have done before you through offensive gaze,
Alchit shechatanu lefanecha b'inayim ramot.
and for the wrong that we have done before you through a condescending glance.
Ve'al kulam elo aslichot. Selach lanu mechalanu kaper lanu. על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בפלילות,
for the wrong that we have done before you by our quickness to oppose,
ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בצדיעת רע,
and for the wrong that we have done before you by deception of a friend,
על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בקשיות עורף,
for the wrong that we have done before you by unwillingness to change,
ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בריצת רגליים להרע,
and for the wrong that we have done before you by our running to embrace an evil act,
על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בשנאת חינם,
for the wrong that we have done before you by our groundless hatred,
ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בצומת יד,
and for the wrong that we have done before you in the giving of false pledge.
ויהו כולם אלוה סליחות, סלח לנו, מחל לנו, כפר לנו.
For the wrong that we have done ourselves by overindulging in food and drink, and for the wrong that we have done our loved ones by refusing to accept their flaws and limitations, for the wrong that we have done each other by ignoring the plight of those who are in need, and for the wrong that we have done creation by buying convenience disposable items, for the wrong that we have done ourselves by failing to set healthy boundaries, and for the wrong that we have done our loved ones by holding on to hurts from the past, for the wrong that we have done each other by failing to more actively protest and work to fix systemic inequality, and for the wrong that we have done creation by using pandemic overwhelm as an excuse to let our environmental commitments slide, for the wrong that we have done ourselves by pretending to hold it together while breaking inside, and for the wrong that we have done our loved ones by not communicating fully and honestly and often, for the wrong that we have done each other, othering large groups of people and blaming them for all our problems, and for the wrong that we have done creation by taking this life and all its abundance for granted.
ויהו כולם אלוה סליחות, סלח לנו, מחל לנו, כפר לנו.
Please stand as you are able as we open the Ark, and we'll continue on page 452.
אבינו מלכנו חטאנו לפניך, אבינו מלכנו אין לנו מלך אלא אתה, אבינו מלכנו עשה עמנו למען שמך, אבינו מלכנו חדש עלינו שנה טובה, אבינו מלכנו הפר עצת אויבינו, אבינו מלכנו סלח ומחל לכל עוונותינו, אבינו מלכנו החזירנו בתשובה שלמה לפניך, אבינו מלכנו שלח רפואה שלמה לחולים, אבינו מלכנו כותבנו בספר חיים טובים, אבינו מלכנו כותבנו בספר גאולה וישועה, אבינו מלכנו כותבנו בספר פרנסה וכלכלה, אבינו מלכנו כותבנו בספר זכויות, אבינו מלכנו כותבנו בספר סליחה ומחילה. אבינו מלכנו, הצמח לנו ישוע בקרוב. אבינו מלכנו, זכור כי עפר אנחנו. אבינו מלכנו, חמול עלינו, ועלול עלינו וטפנו. אבינו מלכנו, עשה למען הרוגים על שם קודשך. אבינו מלכנו, עשה למען שמך הגדול, הגיבור והנורא, שנקרא עלינו.
A reading entitled Avinu Malkeinu by Sabrina Sojourner. Avinu Malkeinu, open our hearts so that we will see all the things we have been unwilling to see and grow in humility and compassion. Avinu Malkeinu, remove cynicism from our hearts that we may experience and move through despair and hopeless to be the person you are calling us to be. Avinu Malkeinu, inspire us to be a contribution to efforts to end structural racism, personal racism, and bigotry, including in our Jewish institutions. Avinu Malkeinu, inspire us to be a contribution to efforts to end structural sexism, personal sexism, and bigotry, including in our Jewish institutions. Avinu Malkeinu, inspire us to be a contribution to efforts to end structural heterosexism, personal heterosexism, and bigotry, including in our Jewish institutions. Avinu Malkeinu, inspire us to be a contribution to efforts to end structural ableism, personal ableism, and bigotry, including in our Jewish institutions. Avinu Malkeinu, inspire us to be a contribution to efforts to end structural ageism, personal ageism, and bigotry, including in our Jewish institutions. Avinu Malkeinu, inspire us to be a contribution to efforts to end structural anti-Semitism, personal anti-Semitism, and bigotry. Avinu Malkeinu, inspire us to be a compassionate to those with whom we disagree. May we see their humanity even then when they fail to see ours. Avinu Malkeinu, move us to own our humanity wherein we live, what you have taught us all our lives. We are all your creations. Avinu Malkeinu, let us not rest comfortably in the words of these prayers, waiting for you to first act on us. We must act on ourselves.
Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Chonenu v'anenu, ki ein banu masim. Aseh imanu, tzedakah v'chesed. Aseh imanu, tzedakah v'chesed, v'hoshienu. Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Chonenu v'anenu, ki ein banu masim. Aseh imanu, tzedakah v'chesed. Aseh imanu, tzedakah v'chesed, v'hoshienu.
You may be seated. We continue with the Kaddish Titkabal on page 1188.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה
Amen.
בעלמא דברה חירותי וימליך מלכותי בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי כל בית ישראל בגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם לעולם בעלמיה יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה ברכו לעילה לעילה מכל ברכתה ושירתה תשבחתה ונחמתה דמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן.
Amen.
תתקבל צלות דהון ובאו דהון דכל בית ישראל קודם אבוהון דיבי שמיה ואמרו אמן.
Amen.
יהי שלום רבה מן שמיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל ואמרו אמן.
Amen.
We open the ark now for the Aleinu, which can be found on page 1202.
Aleinu always approaches the end of our service and reminds us that this conversation continues. Aleinu l'shabeach, it is upon us to praise. Why would we say that at the end of a service that has been full of praising? Reminding us that that is not just in the context of a service. It is upon us to live lives that manifest praise of the divine. I invite you, those of you still with us, if you're so inclined, to share in the chat what is something that is upon us to do, that you are feeling, what is some call that you are feeling inspired to take up, that it is upon us to do, to live lives of praise, to live lives that manifest that vision of the world for which we pray. Aleinu l'shabeach, l'adon hakol, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שנתן לנו תורת אמת, וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא. שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסד ארץ ומשה וקרא בשמיים ממעל ושכינתו זו בגובה ואין עוד. It is up to us to hallow creation, to respond to life with the fullness of our lives. It is up to us to meet the world, to embrace the whole even as we wrestle with its parts. It is up to us to repair the world and to bind our lives to truth. ככתוב בתורתך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ. ביום ההוא, ביום ההוא, יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו, ושמו, ושמו אחד. A year ago, when we did these first remote Yom Kippur services, people gave us really lovely, generous feedback. But the one really consistent critique was that they really missed the Yom Kippur appeal. So it's back this year. And I am so pleased to invite my stalwart co-leader of Yom Kippur Mariv for many, many years, also serving as president this year, Jared Rubin, to make our appeal this year.
Thank you, Rabbi. Greetings, friends. So one of the honors that comes with being TBI's president is to deliver the annual appeal on the eve of Yom Kippur. When I stepped into this role in January, I was envisioning a packed house here in the sanctuary, complete with a captive audience. With this year's virtual service, I recognize that it will be all too easy for congregants to drift away from the computer, to check on your pets, or to run to the bathroom. Therefore, I'm going to keep my comments exceedingly brief in the hope that I can maintain your attention. This past year has been incredibly challenging in so many different respects, emotionally, physically, and socially. I fully recognize that for many of us in the TBI community, the proverbial well may be running a bit dry. The pandemic has strained our social fabric, not to mention our sense of health, security, and well-being. During this past year, many of us have been impacted by the loss of income, unanticipated expenses, and financial uncertainty. In many respects, TBI finds itself in a similar situation. At times like these, when the well is running low, I think it's absolutely essential to seek out and embrace that which sustains you. If you're listening to me this evening, then it's clear that you receive sustenance and nourishment from what TBI has to offer. TBI provides us with an outlet for social justice, a means to educate our adults and our youth, a vehicle by which we can support one another through trying times, and a place where we can nurture our spiritual connection to God and to Judaism. Throughout this pandemic, TBI staff and clergy have worked hard to provide our congregation with uninterrupted access to high-quality services and programming. We have pivoted as needed in support of our members, families, children, and elders. Like many of you, TBI has also faced unexpected expenses during this past year, such as the purchase of our OHEL and audiovisual equipment. We did not shy away from these purchases because we knew that they were needed to provide continued nourishment to our congregation and to keep our congregants engaged and connected. Under the terrific fiscal stewardship of our executive director and the committed members of our finance committee, we have weathered the storm and kept our budget balanced. But as I'm sure you know, it takes financial resources and the generosity of our members to keep TBI running. This annual Yom Kippur appeal is essential to ensure that we have the needed resources to do our critical work. Our goal for this year's Yom Kippur appeal is $10,000. please take the time to give what you can. If a financial contribution is going to cause you undue hardship, then please consider other ways you can support our important work, through volunteering, or perhaps by getting involved in TBI's governance. One way or another, please commit to staying engaged. That's really my appeal to you more than anything else. I would normally conclude my remarks by looking around beseechingly to my captive audience here in the sanctuary. But that really wouldn't be fair to the musicians, volunteers, and lay leaders here in attendance. Instead, I'd like to ask you to just take a few moments to reflect how you received nourishment and sustenance from TBI, particularly when the well might be running a bit dry. If you feel inclined to share your reflection in the chat, please do so. If the well feels dry, then please tap into what sustains you, now more than ever. Thank you for taking our appeal to heart and for your continued financial support. May your well be replenished in the year ahead from both unexpected developments and from the intentional actions that you might take in your quest for sustenance and nourishment. Wishing you all a Gemar Chatima Tova. May you and your loved ones be inscribed and sealed in the book of health, happiness, and peace.
Amen. Thank you, Jared, for that appeal. And thank you, Jared, when you agreed to be in the line of succession to the TBI presidency a few years ago. You did not imagine all that being COVID TBI president would entail, and I sometimes worry that we tap your well a little too dry, but you continue to give to us with grace.
The Mourner's Kaddish is on page 1216.
As we close our service, move towards closing our service, we invoke the presence and honor the memories of our loved ones who have died. Life does continue to go on, and even since Rosh Hashanah, members of our community have lost loved ones. Since Rosh Hashanah, 2 new babies have been born in our community. And Mourner's Kaddish, though traditionally said by mourners, is a statement of awe at the holiness of life, a statement of sanctification of God's presence, imbuing every aspect of life from birth to death. So with that sense of awe for all we have been given and in honor of those we have lost, I invite those of you who are in mourning, if you're tuning in on the chat, to share the names of those for whom you are saying Kaddish. In our community, Yom Kippur marks the yahrzeits of Robert Lowe, Erwin Miller, Daniel Joshua Resigi, Max Strauss, Gertrude Boschnack-Reed, Con Hess, Edward Levitas, and Frida Taxon, Zichronam Livracha. May their memories be for blessing. And if you're saying Kaddish, I invite you, as you are able, to stand or rise in spirit with me as we recite this.
Kaddish is on page 1216.
Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, be'alma divrach yeruteh v'yamlich malchuteh, b'chayechon uvyomechon, uv'chaye dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala uvizman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shemei Rabbah mevorach, le'olam u'le'almei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal, shemei dekudsha brichu. Le'ela, le'ela, mikol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shalama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, Amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, v'imru, Amen.
Amen.
May the one who creates harmony above make peace for us and for all Israel and for all who dwell on earth. May all mourners be comforted. May the memories of those we have named and those we are holding in our hearts be for blessing. Amen. Now, we turn to Psalm 27, which we'll be singing for those who have a hard copy TBI Machzor on page 1220. For those who are just using the PDF, there's also the special handout PDF with our lyrics in transliteration, includes the lyrics to this song from verse 8, Lach amar libi bakshu fanai, et panai havaya, et panecha Adonai, avakesh, your face I will seek. The essence of repentance is to rebuild relationship, is to seek to re-encounter each other after rupture. So we'll close our live service together with this intention. May we see and seek each other. May we be receptive to the divine in each other in this new year. And after this service, after we sing this line, I invite you to stick around, and those of you in the chat, just give each other love as we play the video made by community members last year singing Achat Sha'alti. So I'll say it before we sing and go silent afterwards. Thank you for being with us this evening, however you were with us. And Gamar Chatima Tova, may you be sealed for good endings and good continuation of the story. Lach amar libi, bakshu fanai, bakshu fanai. 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 Et panaich havaya, avakesh. Et panaich havaya, avakesh. Lach amar libi, bakshu fanai, bakshu fanai. 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 Et panai havaya, avakesh. sorry. I have already this Yom Kippur made a mistake for which I need to apologize to the community. There are some things you probably need to know before we play our final video, and Jared is going to tell you them.
Okay, so I do have a couple of announcements. The complete TBI High Holiday schedule is on our website. TBI members have received emails with links for sign-ups for in-person services, YouTube and Zoom. Tomorrow, Thursday, 9 a.m. children's service for up to age 5 with Rabbi Solomon and Mina Wagner via Zoom. 9:30 a.m. Yom Kippur morning service on YouTube. 10 o'clock, children's service for 6 to 10-year-olds with Rabbi Solomon and Mina Wagner via Zoom. The Yizkor service with Rabbi Yitz will be at approximately 12 noon on YouTube. At 5:30, the Yom Kippur Mincha service, also on YouTube. 6:30 p.m. Ne'ilah service on YouTube. Pre-registration is required for in-person services at TBI. Masks and social distancing will be strictly enforced for in-person gatherings. Please join in the mitzvah of TBI's 26th annual High Holiday Food Drive. This year, we will be collecting food throughout the month of Tishrei, September. Bring canned and packaged food to TBI during office hours or when attending a service. Your generous donation ensures that hungry people in our community have enough to eat. We encourage guests who are watching the services virtually to help support the congregation in providing these services. Please consider making a donation at the TBI website. Thank you to everyone who participated in creating and delivering the services this evening. We wish to thank Kel Weinhold and Karen Kelsky for sponsoring the streaming for Yom Kippur in honor of Alan Deckelbaum, Zichrono Livracha, and Joan Deckelbaum. If you would like to sponsor streaming for an upcoming holiday or Shabbat service, please contact Nina at the office. Gemar Chatima Tova.